Welcome back to the Going Scared podcast. This is Jessica Honegger, your host and founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection. Welcome to the podcast where we cover all things social impact, entrepreneurship, and courage. Today's guest is such a treat. I love Jordan. I met her when I launched my own book called Imperfect Courage a few months ago, and she immediately invited me into her community. I was introduced to her via another friend on a text, and within hours, I was on her Facebook doing a live. I was on her Instagram doing a live. She is that kind of woman. I feel like we see a lot of memes. Her success doesn't diminish mine. Jordan truly lives that out. And she has just launched her newest and first book, author of Own Your Everyday, Overcome the Pressure to Prove and Show Up for What You Were Made to Do. That's a lot of what we ended up talking today. We talk about how we can celebrate this journey and not just get hung up on the outcomes. And she's in her 20s, but I promise you, she has wisdom so far beyond her years. She is such a cheerleader. She is such a voice of someone that I want to uplift in this world. And I know that you are going to gain so much from her wisdom, from her enthusiasm, and please go check out her book. I was able to endorse it, and it is just a really encouraging, uplifting read. She's also host of the very popular The She podcast, and we actually talk about how she launched that podcast so successfully today. Here's my conversation with Jordan. I wanted to start off, just tell us, you are an entrepreneur, you are a content creator, you are an author, you are a speaker. Tell me first about your business. What is it and how did you launch that?
So the very beginning stages, it was just a side hustle. As most, I think, sometimes can start off with just being almost an accidental entrepreneur. But I actually look back and it's funny. I have very entrepreneurial parents. And so I actually was doing a lot of small businesses as a kid, everything from gumball machine businesses to so many other things. And so I've done a lot of little things over the years. But then when I was in college, towards the end of college, I started an Etsy store. And what was so interesting to me is that Etsy store was just a fun little, side hobby. It wasn't anything I planned on actually doing with my life. I have a healthcare administration degree, which is basically a business degree with a focus in the healthcare, sector. And so, started a small business for fun, just to do something creative, and it blew up. I mean, it literally blew up on social media. All of a sudden, I feel like within 3 or 4 months, had like 10,000 Instagram followers and a ton of orders. And I was like, what am I doing? I have no idea how to do this.
Hang on for 1 second when you say suddenly blew up, because I feel like women don't take credit for some of the things that you do. And maybe they came intuitively to you. Maybe they were natural to you, but certainly there was something that led to the suddenly.
Yes. So that's kind of the fun part of the story, and actually what has led to everything else that I've built. So I still have the little store. It's part of what I do, but the reason it blew up, I truly believe, is I did, without even realizing it, understood human to human marketing. Without even intending to say, oh, I'm marketing all my stuff, I actually got really stinking good at storytelling. And sure, the product might be in a photo, or it might not even be in a photo that I was sharing, or, a video that I was sharing, but I was sharing stories because when I started this little thing, I was living in a sorority house with 100 sisters, and 3 or 4 or 5, would come upstairs in this creepy storage closet and help me package these items. And we would sit there and talk until all hours of the night, packaging these things and building community. And so the lessons we were learning and the things we were talking about and the advice we were trading and the dreams we were sharing, I would write about in captions or blog posts or, Facebook posts, and ways that I was growing and all of these things that really connected on a human level. So people really connected with the human behind this little Etsy brand and would share the content with their friends. So like they could probably care less about the mug. I mean, they would still buy the mug or the canvas or whatever the item was at the time. But they would share these captions. And so my media began to grow really, really fast. There was a lot of sharing happening. People really connected with it. And I realized, dang, these messages resonate with more than just the women in my AOPI storage closet, but also with women around the world. And so learning the art of storytelling and creative content marketing without even intending to think I was marketing. I didn't intend to feel like I'm trying to sell to everybody, It was insane how fast it grew. And so that led to really taking on a career in content creation, continuing to build my voice, my marketing strategies, creating various other resources. And in the midst of all of that, I started to look back at that time in that storage closet, and I was like, that place was like a safe place for women. And so we put this tagline on the shop brand, and we made the tagline, "Your brokenness is welcome here." And we chose that because a lot of women during that time were either going through breakups or struggling with body image issues or, whatever. We were all like seniors in college and trying to figure out our lives and feeling completely a mess, and thinking that as soon as we graduated, it would all figure out, which is not the case. But, I put that on there and I ended up sharing about that online, and that actually really grew. Again, that was something, a movement. It was a message that women could own as their own and then also share. So in addition to creating content that storytells and connects, also creating movement mentality, these two things really exploded my business, my online brand, my personal brand, not just the little shop. And that's led to being able to have a top podcast and these other things, writing books that I never anticipated when I just decided I want to start a small side hustle in college. So I think the content, storytelling, and marketing around a movement is really where the power is.
Well, and what you didn't say, which I think is just because it's intuitive to you, you started this to serve women.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is your heart.
Yeah.
And it is authentic, and you are for others. Where did that come from? Because tell me a little bit more about your own, because you do talk about body image, you talk about dating, you talk about your relationship with your husband. Take us back a little bit more through that journey of what even led you. My brokenness is welcome here. What was that own journey in your life where you welcomed your own brokenness? Yeah.
And I think that's, like you said, it's almost intuitive. Like that tagline wasn't something that was like, it wasn't meant to be like a, look at me, it was more like, look at you. And I think the reason that became so powerful to me is because when I was building this little, side hustle for fun, I had sisters and women who believed in it enough to forego their studies and their homework and sit upstairs on a cold tile floor and shove packing peanuts into tiny boxes and support me and drive me to the post office or come with me to the post office and do all the crazy, scrappy things. And in the midst of it, there was this just understood welcomeness. There was this understood, I don't even know if welcomeness is a word, but like this openness, and this like, hey, you don't have to think the same way. You can be struggling with things and come in here and be a part of this little tribe of people that's sitting here and chasing a dream and supporting someone's dream. And I didn't even really know what the dream was. I was just kind of like, this is fun and I love it, So, I think because of that, being part of a sisterhood like that, and then seeing how incredible it was to be supported and how it literally changed my life. Like, Jessica, if I had not had that support, I probably would have closed up shop within the first few weeks because I wouldn't have known what to do. I wouldn't have had enough hands, and I couldn't pay these girls. And so other than in like free pizza, so, to have the sisterhood support me and it literally be a catalyst that changed the trajectory of my entire life gave me this passion, and seeing how powerful it was when people felt welcomed and understood, regardless of what brokenness they were experiencing or challenges or struggles they were walking through. That literally gave me such a passion for kind of turning around and giving that back. I wanted to give other women a space for sisterhood, support of their dreams, to really show them like, look, sister, I know this is hard. I know there's a lot of boxes here and a ton of packing peanuts, and you don't know the first thing about shipping or whatever it is that they're trying to chase, but I'm here for you and I'm cheering for you, and you need to know you can do it. And I think that for me, just it sparked something in me, and that's why I want to turn around and do that for women. And in addition to that, I also felt like even though I was supported in my dreams or in my idea or my crazy wacky side hustles, I also was supported and heard and understood through the real personal struggles that I also brought to the table in that, right? Like I carried those even though I was chasing these big dreams. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We talk so much about the dream and the going after this and the going after that we forget there's a very human element behind all of that and informing all of that. There's body image struggles, there's insecurities, there's the pressure to prove, there's comparison, there's heartbreak, there's all these things we walk through that really can affect not only our businesses but just also our lives and our careers and our friendships. And so I felt like not only was I supported in my dreams, but I was also kind of like, hey, Jay, you don't have to be this perfect boss lady. Like you're just figuring this out and you're bringing your own insecurities and fears to the table. And we're here to support that. And so that space really inspired that for me. And it's basically what I want to provide for women in their businesses and in their lives.
When you look back to that woman packaging, these Etsy shop items in her sorority house with her sisters, I mean, that wasn't very long ago. How many years ago was that?
Just under 5 years ago.
Okay. Well, tell me about the journey between that woman and then the woman you are today. What have you learned? And now that you are adulting, because I can see a lot of people going, yeah, but you had a sorority, you had like this built-in group. And so how do you counsel women now who are like not in the dorm room life where it does feel a little bit easier to create a sisterhood, but like then you get out into the adulting world and it seems like everything is set up to not help you build that. So how has your message sort of translated over time as your stage of life has changed?
Yeah. So, gosh, I remember after I graduated, or right around the time I was getting ready to graduate, I was also I was seriously dating my husband at the time. And so we knew we were working toward marriage and he was pursuing the NFL. And so that was a whole different can of worms to like a whole different roller coaster to ride that was very up and down. And so there was a lot of uncertainty I was about to walk into. And I also was about to leave a community of a bunch of supporters, right? Everyone was going their separate directions. And I remember feeling a little bit scared. And I also was like, I need to get realistic here. And so what I chose to do was I actually closed the Etsy store for a while. I was like, I'm going to continue, stewarding this little online community that I've built. Like what I have and what I truly can practically do is not managing inventory and returns and shipping and all these things because I was about to be traveling a lot and trying to start. And I thought in my brain, well, now I need to go get a real job, right? Like if I like it, it can't possibly be a job. And so I started to pursue that and work on that a little bit more. And in the middle of graduation, in between, there was like a bridge of, I graduated and a little bit later got married, or engaged and then married. So in that kind of gap season is when I started, I was like, what can I actually do that I can do myself? Because I don't have all these hands to help me package dozens of items and do all of this and also have that support. So I just decided to start a little photography company. And that was something I could do more individually. And my husband was able to help support me when he had time off from football. And so there was this kind of weird transitional phase where I was like, okay, I need to look at my circumstances and think, what can I actually do right now? So I worked on photography and I also really continued to work on just storytelling and encouraging other women who did feel that isolation, even though, because I was then feeling it like, well, now I don't have 10, 15 women, right next to me cheering me on. And then also I think over that time, I really seeked out mentors. I had a woman who was like, she's like the ultimate empowerer. And she started really encouraging me to use my voice. And so I started learning from her. She had built, communities of women and businesses and ministries and all of these things. And so I think during that kind of transitional time, I scaled back and I had to be okay with letting that go a little bit so that I could grow. Sometimes I was talking to a friend about this. Sometimes I think you have to make less or do less in order to do more down the road. And I'm so glad I chose to do that because it helped me kind of explore the next best step rather than just holding so tightly to like, no, this is my thing and it makes good money and I need to hold on to it. But I really couldn't do it on my own. And so I needed to think about what can I do in this season? And also at the same time was learning to be coachable. And so I really started seeking mentors in my life that had either gone ahead of me or done things that I really loved and wanted to do. And they really provided a lot of guidance, a lot of support. I was able to start speaking in that time because one of my mentors really encouraged me to do that and gave me some tools and provided, some guidance on how to do that. And it's crazy just how I think being coachable and being willing to let things go was really, really big for me because then 2 years later, that same mentor who was like, hey, we're going to work on your voice. We're going to continue to refine your message, as you're kind of just supporting your early marriage. We were like, hey, let's open the shop back up and really put this tagline on it. So again, it was like, you can let things go for a season, grow, be coachable. That was a huge thing for me. It's really shaped who I am in the overall direction. built even just like you said, my marketing skills, like learned what actually resonates, did a lot of education, invested in education with whatever, disposable income I had, which was not much, especially that first year. But I literally almost bankrupted us. I spent like $1,000 and we had $2,000, and my husband runs in the door. Like, we're married 2 months. I'm not used to consulting him on decisions. And he's like, did you just spend half our net worth? I was like, yeah, but I promise it'll be really worth it. And it really was. It taught me so much about what I needed to know, rather than just, throwing things on social media, really learning how to do it strategically, how to build out, marketing and things like that. So I was able to then think bigger picture than what I had been doing in college, because I was able to let it go, seek those mentors, invest in that education, be coachable, and then slowly kind of start adding those elements into what I had currently. And that's what allowed it to grow, and what's allowed me to grow as a woman, knowing how important it is to be a constant student and let things go and then maybe pick them back up when the time is right.
I think it is so powerful. We have this saying at Noonday where we say, go slow to go fast.
Yes.
And for you to learn that in your early 20s, that is such a huge takeaway, because you were willing to let go of something that by all outside standards was successful and it was doing well. So for you to be willing to let go and become a learner again, and to be adaptable and teachable, you say it with such ease. And yet I feel like that, a lot of us aren't willing to do that. A lot of us, we white knuckle. We white knuckle whatever it is, and we don't want to reach out for help. And I think that's such a part of your success. And I'm struck by the fact that you are a 3 on the Enneagram. I do know that. And I'm friends with very, very, very many 3s. Shameless 3. But I have to say, what I hear from my 3 friends, I just had coffee with one of my 3 friends this morning, is that vulnerability can be challenging, and just white knuckling your way to success is kind of like the typical path for a 3. But what I hear from you is there's been this willingness to allow vulnerability in and allow others into your vulnerability. Can you think back to your first time in your life where you realized, like, I've got to be vulnerable in order to be whole?
Yeah, I actually wrote about this in my book, because so when I was in college, before all of the Etsy store and all of that, I am such a goals person. As an Enneagram 3, it's like, you need to have some lofty goals and you better achieve them, right? And so that's just how my brain works. And I remember the year after, my grandma and I were very, very close, and she passed away my freshman year of college. And so that following fall, about a year, the following summer, I decided I want to get in better shape, because freshman 15 is a real thing. And I also decided, I want to do that by preparing to run a half marathon in honor of my grandmother's life, because the half marathon that I had seen was to take place, or the one that I found online nearby was to take place the same weekend that my grandmother passed away a year prior. So to me, that was a really special way to experience like endurance and really experiencing life and honoring her life. And it was honestly, I think, a really sweet way for me to grieve, because I had kind of bottled a lot of that up for a long time. Being a 3, you kind of like, at least for me, I'm very image based. And so I'm like, I'm good. I'm strong. I got all the things going on. Like, we got this, and I kind of buried my own pain for that whole first year, especially. That's a very transitional time in a young woman's life, going away to college, learning, figuring out what she wants to do, all those things. And so that following summer, I said, I'm going to train for this half marathon. And secretly at the back of my mind, I was like, I also want to lose a lot of weight, even though I was not overweight. I did not need to lose weight. I could have gotten in better shape per se, but I didn't need to be dropping 30 pounds. You know what I mean? But I decided that's what I needed. And so that whole summer, I kind of masked what became an obsession with, I'm chasing a goal and I need to be lean and I need to be, in shape. And so I'd be running all these miles. I would run 8, 10, 12 miles a day and eat I would net 250 calories, maybe 400 calories. I would basically not replenish, because I heard somewhere that if you're not eating as many calories as you burn, you'll lose weight, which I didn't actually understand the true way to do that healthy. I just found it on Google and I was like, perfect, got it. So I basically put my body through a living hell, honestly, because I was just abusing it. I was running on pavement. I wasn't, taking care of it. I wasn't nourishing it. I was literally just starving it almost, but all because I had this goal of a certain weight, a certain, running a certain, distance, all of that. And I became very obsessed with that goal and almost really hurt myself. My mom was very, very concerned. There was a lot of issues with that. And what was interesting is I thought, well, I won't need to be this extreme after this half marathon because I will have accomplished the goal, right? Well, what I found was that actually that mentality, that mindset, that kind of obsessiveness, like how much I was tracking every calorie I was eating and all of that, like literally making my life about data and how many calories I could burn and pounds on the scale and all this stuff, that didn't just like turn off after I ran the half marathon. It actually was something that was like ingrained in my brain, and it definitely got less extreme afterwards. But it's like, once you know how many calories is in an apple, like you're mentally doing that, even if you're not physically tracking it. And so it became something that was very, I think I was almost like enslaved to for a while. And I didn't want to talk about that because that made me feel like, well, I don't have a problem. Like, I don't have a problem. Like, I'm good, And especially being the 3, like people would say like, oh my gosh, you've gotten so thin. And they're like concerned. And I'm like, thank you. What a nice compliment, So it really almost like drove it and made it worse when people had expressed their concern, because then I was like, cool, it's working. So all that to say, long story short, I really kind of buried that. And as it got less and less extreme, over the course of time after that half marathon, I wasn't as extreme with it, and it definitely improved, and I got to a healthier place after a while. But then my senior year rolled around, and it wasn't so much of an issue by that point, but I had never actually talked about it. I was like, well, it's no longer a problem, or it's not that bad of a problem, and other people have it worse, so I just don't need to, it's fine. I don't need to talk about it. It's over, part of my story, done with it. And but I still felt like I still had that mindset, like I mentioned, where I still would kind of think about that. And I'd still get into these weeks where I'd get too extreme, and I'd still, it wasn't actually something I was free of. And I think I was actually quite ashamed of it because I didn't want to be seen as someone who ever had a problem. Like, God forbid, right? So then it was crazy because that spring, I had become really close friends with a gal named Mel, and she's one of my closest friends and absolutely love her. And I wrote about this in the book. And, she and I were talking one day, and she began to open up about, I had a very personal, experience with God that year that really opened my mind to what I had really been doing and kind of broke me in a way. So I was definitely more humbled and willing to talk about it. But then she and I, a few months after that experience, she and I were talking, and she started to open up about things she was struggling with, very related and very similar to what I had experienced. And I basically finally was like, I just broke down, and she and I had this amazing conversation where for the first time I really kind of felt like I had a safe place to share that, kind of admitted to that in so many ways. Like, I have actually struggled with something like that too. And, kind of being in that space and having someone kind of go first, allowed me the freedom, I think, to open up about it more. And now I'm completely unashamed to share that part of my story. And after that, I was sharing it with sorority sisters. I was talking about it when we were packaging peanuts or packing peanuts into boxes as we were shipping stuff. And it really became actually a place of freedom, but almost being invited into that vulnerability by someone else saying, yeah, like, me too, I'm here with you, was huge. And I think that really changed the whole way I see the power of vulnerability and why it matters and why it works.
So important. What would you say to the person listening right now who sees that friend and is like, oh my gosh, I know she's obsessing. She's lost way too much weight. Because you kind of said people did come to you with concerns, but then you, because of where you were at that point in your story, you received that as almost fuel for the fire.
Yeah.
What do you say to those of us that see those friends that are going down that road that you went down?
Honestly, I think it's really difficult to convince somebody in that space that there's something wrong or that they need help or whatever. So one of the best things I can say is just really love them and kind of be watching out. And I think the other piece too, one thing my mom did for me is she actually went to a doctor, and she was like, hey, what should I be looking for? When should I intervene? This is what's going on. And he gave her some things to help monitor without kind of overbearing, if that makes sense. And she actually did that without me even really knowing. And that's why I think part of it was she really loved me well through it too. And I think one of the biggest things I can say is, instead of maybe accusing or bringing it up is, not that we're actually accusing, but I think sometimes it can be received as an accusation when all we're trying to do is love and express our concern. One of two things. I think one is just really love, really remind them of the healthy behaviors that they do, remind them of, the things that are true. But the other thing is, if you've ever experienced anything like that, opening up about it is sometimes a way for them to get like a mirror rather than saying, hey, like I've noticed you've been doing this, or I noticed you're struggling with this, or hey, you're getting really thin. Like I think a lot of times, or whatever the situation might be, a lot of times using our own story can be a way to own it and not put them on the defense, but also offer them a mirror and a safe place to open up and even ask for help. So those two things really helped me. And so that's probably the best thing I can say. It's different for everyone, but that definitely would be huge.
Well, your new book, which is out in the world, Own Your Everyday, that's very kind of like what you're saying is like, we all every day have these struggles. And I think the more we own our everyday struggles, our everyday successes, all of those things, it creates that space for someone else to go first too. So I think that's really powerful. Don't fixate on this girl's problem and on what you're seeing. But if you can, find something relatable in your own life, because really it's a way to exhibit control, right? I mean,
absolutely.
When you're feeling out of control, you're like, what do I do with grief? Well, I don't want to deal with grief. So I'm going to go focus on this other thing that I can control. I mean, that's definitely how eating disorders showed up in my life. And it can show up in other, once I became a parent, it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to try to control my parenting and perfect kids out. It's like, no, wherever we're trying to just white knuckle, those are the places where we need to become aware, and we're all have the places in those places in our lives. So I love that your advice is to just like, you focus on your own struggle, open up about that, and then let that create a safe place for her is really powerful. Okay. So you are multi-passionate, but I'm curious, as a multi-passionate person, is there a title that you sort of, when you try it on, you're like, yeah, that feels good. Cause like I'm an author, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, I'm multi-passionate as well, but like, I don't wear author. Like when I put that on, I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book, but it's not like, that's like, but when I wear entrepreneur, I'm like, yes, I like to build, I'm building something that matters like that. You know what I mean? Is there something that excites you when you try it on?
Yes. And that is actually something I've really been thinking about. And it's so hard when we have these labels because it makes you feel like you have to like live in a box, right? So that's why I totally resonate with you. Like if I just say author, it's like, oh, okay, so all you do is write books. I'm like, no, like I build brands and I educate others and I coach women. Like, hold on, So I think the best way I think the title or the words that really resonate with me that make me go, yes, it fires me up is creative entrepreneur and educator. I've really loved getting to coach other women and provide marketing strategies and tools to help them really make impact. I mean, yes, like grow their brands and income, but how do you actually do human to human connection and marketing in such a way that it's not even really marketing, or it's not the traditional way we think about it? That stuff fires me up. It's what's allowed me to really do what I do. And not only, I think a book is honestly, another way, another channel to reach people and bring them into your ecosystem. And so a lot of times I think we can look at that as like the thing. I look at it as like the door to the thing. So even just that mindset, I think it makes it a little bit different than how I would traditionally think of authors. So yeah, I definitely think creative entrepreneur and educator is really what fires me up, what I've really been stepping into a lot more and where I'm continuing to go.
And how are you monetizing coaching women?
So I have done a little bit. It's going to be a lot more of a focus in the next year. So it's still a newer thing, but over the last year, I did a lot of one-on-one and kind of some group coaching. And I've done a lot for like influencers too, one-on-one, because I've just become friends with them. And that's just a different animal, different kind of direction to learn how to build a business from. It's a different setup than traditional entrepreneurship. And so a lot of that has been one-on-one. I've obviously in this season had to kind of pull back just as you launch a book. That's almost impossible, as you know. But I am now really excited because I've had so many different requests for coaching programs and doing that online and workshops and things like that. So that's kind of the next goal. But then my shop, we also created a mentorship program, which isn't business specific. It's more like life and faith focused. But that is just a 12-month mentorship kind of membership program. And that helps us support and sustain the shop element of things when, we're not doing big new launches or anything like that. And it really also provides women just some practical life mentorship like I had in that closet. And so just recreating that there is really sweet. I have a couple other women, one of which has been a mentor and a coach for me. She's in those training videos as well as another friend of mine. So that's been kind of a unique way to sustain things in seasons and also provide women with some life mentorship. And then this coming year, we'll do some really neat kind of coaching programs that I am dreaming up and building out, but don't have a whole lot to share on yet.
Well, I am so excited because I feel like, I love educators and influencers that are educating other women, but you do have a very distinct way of doing it with such authenticity and with such vulnerability. And I feel like that's a little bit of what's missing. So I'm just really excited to support you in any way as you begin to monetize and really grow your gifts into something that can also support your family. Okay, so you mentioned launches. So let's talk about launches because I have to admit, sometimes I'm like, what, does she just have the Midas touch? Like, like you launch your podcast and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's like at 100,000 downloads in like 2 weeks or whatever. And I'm like, okay, what is happening? And then also you have multiple Instagram accounts too. Like you kind of, and I know that was probably very strategic. So let's say, I don't know, we could take podcast and that's a good thing to launch. Like what would be your way how would you advise someone that is launching? Like what's some of your like secret sauce that goes into these launches?
It is so funny that you say this, Jessica. This is like affirmation from the good Lord, I'm telling you, because I was sitting at the Shake Shack in Milwaukee with a friend of mine yesterday who's also a podcaster and an influencer. And I was like mapping out strategies for her and new launch plans and how to build out her product and launch it the right way. And she looks at me, she's like, you have to teach launching. She's like, you are a launch consultant.
That is
like, wow,
so
I never
crazy.
thought of that.
That's so crazy. That's how I feel. I'm like, girlfriend knows how to launch.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'll give a little quick I'll give the Spark Notes version of the strategic way that we launched a podcast and other things, but I'll focus on that for the sake of the example. So one thing that we did, and this was unintentional, but now I'm advising people to do it. I was planning on launching a podcast in September of 2018 and life happened, Jessica. Like I was struggling with massive anxiety, burnout. I had no idea where even to, I didn't even know what category I wanted to put this in, which is a kind of a minor detail, right? I'm like 2 days before we're about to launch this into the world, I'm like, hold the phone. I don't know what we need to do. We need to stop. And so I just had massive uncertainty and a lot of burnout in my life. And I just didn't feel like I could really get behind it well. And I look at launching a podcast, like I think it can be, so many people want to do it kind of passively. I'm like, no, this is like the next media. Like we need to be doing this well. And I didn't feel like I could do it well. So I pulled a launch and I'd been like kind of talking about it for several weeks on social media and my email list and all this stuff. So I had a lot of people who were excited just because I had been kind of ramping it up, and then I pulled it, which I thought was going to completely ruin it. I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to hate me. Well, what actually happened is people were like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that you did this because it gave me permission to maybe kind of dial back and look at what I really want to do and how I want to do it. And I respect you a lot for that. So that was encouraging. But beyond that, it actually created this new excitement because that whole month I pushed it back 4 weeks. And that whole month I was able to say like, guys, I'm so glad because we were making it so much better. This was so true. But I was like, I'm so glad we decided to hold off because there's more to come. This is super exciting. Like it's going to be so much better than it would have been. It'll be so worth the wait. So I was able to tell those people that authentically. And so there was more and more excitement. And then about 3 weeks before we actually launched it, I had this kind of crazy harebrained idea. And I was like, you know what? I know that next year, because I was planning to launch Own Your Everyday, I was like, starting to think about marketing and whatnot. And I said, I know next year I'm going to be launching a book. And I've also launched several courses and online programs over the years and apparel and all this stuff. And I was like, what has been the most successful, or what do other people find to be successful? And one of the biggest things people do when they launch a book is they have a launch team. And I'm like, well, if people are going to do that for one form of media, which is a book, why wouldn't we do that for a course or for a podcast? Like, why wouldn't we give some people early access, get some testimonials, beta test it, right? Like get some people loving it and then sharing it with their friends, provide them with the digital assets, the, early clips, the previews, the graphics, the video, whatever. Let's try that. And let's not make it super big because I didn't want it to be a stressful thing, but I just thought, let's test it. Let's see what happens. So I asked my assistant if she would help run this little Facebook group, and we got about 400 to 500 women in there. It wasn't massive, but it wasn't, 5 people. It was a decent beta test group. And I said, you guys are team She, because the podcast is called She. And I said, y'all are going to help me launch this into the world. And what they got in return is not only the community, which has now evolved and shifted into my actual podcast community, but it also was a place that they could connect. And I would do live videos in there. They would get early sneak peeks of episodes. There was just a bunch of little perks for them. They had opportunities to win things if they, subscribed and left a review, or had a friend subscribe and could share about that. So they were celebrating each other's wins. And then they were watching the podcast climb the charts when it went live, because, man, it went live and those girls mobilized. I mean, the whole week prior, we gave them the mission to just share about, hey, it's coming on this day. It's coming on this day. Get excited. You're going to love this podcast. Da, 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 da. And then on launch day, we had 5 episodes go live. So there was the opportunity to binge listen. And then we had, them share whichever episode was their favorite. And what I loved about that is that each one of those episodes covered something different. We had kind of our introduction, like the why behind the podcast episode. And then we had our 4 core topics. We had a podcast that covered health and like wellness. We had a podcast that covered faith. We had a podcast that covered business, like my early start story and journey. And then we also had one that covered relationships. And so those are kind of the 4 core topics we hit on in the podcast I have. And so, what I loved about that is women could share if they were in business, like, you have to listen to this podcast on imposter syndrome and her story and starting a business in college, or, oh my gosh, like, I love this episode about friendship, and so whatever resonated with different types of women, they shared those out with their friends. And so it wasn't just like a one size fits all option. And man, those girls in that launch team it was so fun because they felt like it was our community, and Team She went to town and they would watch this podcast hop to number 6 on the top charts. And then they would share about it with their friends, like, you guys, this podcast is at number 6. And people were like, oh my gosh, that's cool. And they'd go check it out. And then it got to number 3, and then it got to number 2. And it was like a team effort watching this. And that's the same thing that happens with book launches. And so I was like, but I just kind of added a different spin. And because it was a digital resource, we could give them things early, and there was unique ways for them to get involved. And that was so incredibly huge for us, having those few options and then having a team to rally behind it, giving them the assets they needed, the tools they needed, the benefits of community and, live interaction with me and things like that. And I always advise women who want to launch anything, that's just one way. I mean, there's also all these other like back end funnels and things you can do. But I think the most powerful thing is word of mouth. Like, you don't need to be a celebrity. And I think this is why I want to say this. And I'm so passionate about it, because a lot of people could look at me and be like, well, you had 200,000 Instagram followers. Like, of course it was easy for you to launch a podcast. And I'm like, no, hold right there, because I have a lot of people I know that have that too. And they didn't have nearly that beginning. Why? Because there was no true strategy and there was no community buy-in. It was just like, hey guys, like, my podcast launches next week, swipe up, and it's like, nobody cares if there's no buzz about it, if there's no true community around it. And so you can have the biggest, following in the world and not have a family. And so my biggest thing has been, how do you create buy-in and build a family, and then give them the tools they need to get involved so that your success is their success and they have a piece of it too, because that's truly, as you tap into other tribes, what makes your thing our thing, and then what makes it so successful and carries it so fast.
I love this quote by Margaret Mead. It says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think we can focus on that number. Like you even said, 500 people wasn't anything mind-blowing, but I mean, 500 people can make a podcast go to the top of the charts, and just really focusing on building community and then harnessing community, because it really just goes back to the college dorm room. I mean, it's the same concept of like being a sisterhood, putting your needs out there, inviting other people along to be a part of what you're building. People want to be asked. I did fundraising for a hot second in my early 20s for United Way. And one thing that we would go tell crowds is I would do fundraisings. It was during the .com. You were probably in elementary school. And I would go
maybe high school.
Maybe high school. Okay. So I'd go to these huge tech companies based here in Austin and do these big pitches. And one thing they would tell us at United Way is that 95% of people don't give just because they aren't asked. And there's just so much power and being invited into someone else's story and saying, I'm not going to be alone, so come with me. And that really is what a launch is inviting other people in to launch it with you. I hate the term self-made. I think it's such a
me
myth.
Too. So true. And honestly,
like
another thing
in my mouth.
It's so true. And honestly, Jessica, like even this is so powerful. And I forgot to mention this. I also picked a few people that I had built a relationship with in any way. And usually I try to pick people who I have been able to serve and bless and cheer on first. Like I didn't just like call somebody that had big a following on Instagram and be like, hey, like, do you think you could share this? I know we don't know each other. No, I called you. I called my friend Audrey, and I called 2 or 3 other people. And I was like, hey, y'all, do you mind sharing about this? Because we have a connection and a relationship. And so I was literally 2 days ago just speaking at a conference with hundreds of female entrepreneurs. We were talking about this podcast thing, and they were asking me, how the heck did you do that? Just like we were talking about. And the other thing I told them was, look, you might have, let's say you have 6,000 social media followers, for example. Reach out to 2 or 3 other friends. Be building relationships where you're cheering for others first, not because you hope they'll do something for you, but that when eventually you do need their support, it's not like random or like you're trying to mooch off them. Like that's your relationship. It's a give and a take, right? And so, I told them, I said, find another couple of friends who have 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 3,000 followers or social or, subscribers or whatever. And you find people in those circles with you rather than just feeling like, okay, I just got to contact these strangers, and hope they'll share my stuff, which they probably won't. Actually finding those friends and saying, hey, sister, like, can you help me with this? And most people really want to. Like, I loved getting to help promote your book because I believe in it. And I love what you've done. I've been inspired by your story. I love the way you've been focused on sisterhood and impacting women through the avenue of entrepreneurship. I think those 2 things together are like wicked smart and incredibly impactful. And so getting to come alongside that, I was like, someone I actually want to help support this new project would be someone like Jessica, because I highly respect her. I am connected with her. I believe in her book, and so I even reached out to a couple of friends that are kind of in my niche and have overlapping audiences. And that was also another big part. It wasn't hundreds of them, but I sent it to a couple people and said, hey, if you have a second, do you mind sharing this on your story? And that helped too. So I think that's another big piece, is reaching out to our friends to ask for help and being willing to help them too.
Totally. And when you did reach out, I was like 100,000% yes, because
right.
You had shown up for me, and it wasn't, and you showed up for me not in this way that was like, I'm going to scratch your back.
Right.
So eventually that's not your heart, and I think we can all see through that when that happens. And so it really is like a matter of how are you authentically sistering other people and just reaching out, showing up for people in different ways. And then, you're building that relationship, and that's just what it takes, is putting yourself out there. And
that's the thing too. I mean, I had no idea I was going to be launching a podcast when your book was launching. Wasn't even a plan. You know what I mean? I was like, I didn't have that in my brain. It was just like, oh my gosh. Like, and I think you reached out to me first, like, your podcast is crushing, or you said something. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Would you be willing to share about it? Like, it wasn't like a even preconceived thing. And I think that's one thing we have to remember as people. It's like, we have to be willing to give. And I think that's a lost art, especially in this social media collaboration world. Like, yes, ask your friends for help and support on your things, please. But they need to be people that you actually are willing to come alongside, even if they never could give something back to you. And I think we forget that. But that's the power of human connection. And actually, to be honest, there are many friends that have done things for me that I've never been able to repay, and vice versa. But we have some of the best relationships. And I think that's the thing. It's not like hey, can you do this for me and I'll do this for you, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, I just actually really think you're awesome. And let me support you because I know it's hard, or I've been there. And those are some of my best friendships that I've made online. And we don't necessarily share each other's stuff to do it, or do favors for each other. And so I think we have to remember that as business owners, as women, as, friends. I think my mom always told me, she goes, don't be a mooch. And that doesn't mean don't receive help from people, but like the word mooch basically means it's someone who gives or takes and takes, or hopes to basically take from others without ever really being willing to support, even if they don't get anything in return. And so my mom always told me, she's like, you're one of the best powers you'll have when it comes to building relationships, which is ultimately what matters in the end, is thinking about what you're willing to bring to the table. And so I always think about that. Like, what do I have to bring to the table for someone else? Whether that's helping promote their book, or whether that's, giving them encouraging advice on a podcast episode, or whatever it is in whatever situation it's in. really thinking about not what can I get from the table, but what can I bring to the table, not only makes sets you up for success in a way that you actually develop real connection, but it also, I think, makes our life more fulfilling and more meaningful. And I think that's what it's all about in the end.
Absolutely. And that's yet another reason to own your everyday, to own your story, to own what you have to give. And I think when we're so focused on what other people have to give, it causes us to not own what we have to give. And then we're not showing up and we're not experiencing connection. We're not sistering. And then we keep saying, gosh, I'm just alone in the world, or I don't have sisters, or how did you do that? And it's like, God, you got to stand up and own what you've been given and quit focusing on what she's been given, girl, because you've been given so freaking much,
Yep. Oh, 100%.
Which is why I'm
100%.
so excited about your book and the message of your book. And so as we wrap up, we always ask our podcast guests, how are you going scared right now?
I'm going scared okay, this has been my prayer. I'm going to share this with you. My prayer has been, God, surprise me. Whether or not someone's a believer or not listening, that has been a prayer of my heart, because as a 3 and as someone who's ambitious and as someone who has big goals, it can be so easy, like we said, to white knuckle and be like, I got to control this launch, right? Like, I love launching. I love being like a launching guru. It's so fun finding the new little strategy or learning and trying new things. But what I have found in the launch of this book, and my heart and my hope, is like the phrase, impact over outcomes has been on my brain, because I think when you launch a book or a podcast or a course or anything into the world, it's like, here's my heart, please don't squash it, So that's terrifying in and of itself. And so I've been going scared, just being willing to relinquish it and release it into the world. But also, there's obviously, we have big goals. We would love to see things that it would do. I think, as every author does. And, for me, I've been trying to remember, like, outcome or impact over outcome, because we can focus so much on numbers and certain outcomes and goals we have for it. But I really hope that this become a book that women want to pass on to other women, whether it's as a gift or they purchase it or they get it at their library or whatever. And so that's requiring me to let go of control and just go scared and remember, I can't control the outcome. I can't control what people's opinions are, but I can pray that I be surprised, and that you can't be surprised if you're trying to control things and know everything. And so I think it can be scary to be willing to let yourself be surprised by whatever outcome it could be. But I think remembering impact over outcome has allowed me to slowly let go of control and just say, okay, God, surprise me.
I love that. I love how you're framing surprise, because I was getting ready for you to say, like, I just want to be surprised and how amazing it's going to go. You know what I mean? Like I just want to be surprised that it does far better than even my greatest dream. But you're just saying, no, I want to be surprised. I want to be surprised at just my own, like, attitude, and just, I'm going to surrender this thing. And like, I want people to just, but I love that. I just downloaded, I made this my new alarm. This is my anthem from the season I'm in right now. And it's this old hymn. What is it called? It says, take my will, it's take my will and make it thine.
Oh, yes.
It shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is thine. I'm not a singer, but just that whole deal, that whole idea of surrender, I think for those of us that are, unabashedly ambitious and unabashedly in love with God and with people and with purpose and with using our lives to help create more opportunity for others, like this whole surrendering journey, it is like not my natural bent.
Oh, same. That's what I mean. It's like, it's work. That's the thing. It's scary. It's not natural for me. I'm over here like, we could strategize this lunch and we could do this and we could do that. And we need, and it's like, that's the thing. You can be strategic and simultaneously surrendered. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I think you can be scared, strategic, and surrendered all at the same time, because it's not like, hey, God, surprise me, do this amazing thing, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to expect you to hand it to me on a silver platter. It's like, I have done what I can do. I have poured my heart into the book. I have strategized as much as I can when it comes to launching, but there has to come a point where I let it go. And I'm like, all right, now I have to surrender because I've done up to my capacity of control, and now I have to release control. And that's not easy, but I think knowing that and knowing I feel like I have done everything I can do, from literally even rewriting and retitling and recovering the book, like that is no big or small thing. All that together, I'm like, all right, it's exactly what it's supposed to be, and I have to believe in that.
I I'm going to pray this with you, because that is, if you can hold on to this like every day and commit that attitude of surrender, you're going to have so much joy in this journey. And I started white knuckling. I had that attitude, and then I white knuckled a bit, and I found myself a few weeks in just feeling like that, the oldest son in the prodigal son story. It's like you've got the son who went off and squandered, and then he came back, and the dad throws him this like huge party. And then the dad's at the party, and he's looking around, and he's like, man, where's my other kid? Like, where did he go? And like the dad notices like someone's missing from this party, and he goes out and he like finds his kid just like hiding in the corner. And the dad's like, why aren't you partying with us? And the kid's like, yeah, because I was with you this whole time and you didn't do anything for me. And, and the dad looks at him and says like, but gosh, everything I've given you like is yours, and I'm with you. Like we are with each other. But, I just find sometimes when we, put so much effort into something, and then we start white knuckling and we start attaching our identity to the outcome, and we start thinking, this is how it has to go. I've worked this hard. This is the way it's supposed to go. Then if you don't get that outcome that you exactly had, you find yourself in this entitled place, moping in the corner. And God's just like, dude, I've given you everything. Like, you've got it all. Like, let's party. Yeah. Like, let's celebrate, Right.
Totally.
So I just love that you are aware of that, and that is your attitude, because if you just make that your anthem, man, you're going to have so much fun. And I'm excited for you.
Well, thank you. I will say one last thing, because I know we're wrapping up, but one tangible way that I've committed to doing that, and I'm going to say this on air so that I have to be held accountable to it. Okay. So my goal and a personal commitment that I made is that I'm not going to watch charts. I'm not going to ask for sales numbers. I'm not going to do any of that the entire first week of this launch. Because I remember when we watched the podcast, or even when we've, announced pre-order bonuses, like we're watching, oh my gosh, where's it at on Amazon? And I actually think that sucks the joy out of it, because cool, you get to number 3, but then, it changes every hour. Right now you get down to number 4 and it's like disheartening, even though it's like, holy cow, you're at number 4. That's amazing. So I was like, Matt, I want you, if you need to be kept in touch or just kind of keeping tabs on things, like go for it. But I don't want to know until, after this has happened. And I don't really want to keep a close eye on it. And that's kind of counterintuitive, because it's like, when else would you be watching that stuff? But all it is a ranking system. And I don't think a ranking system is the fair estimate of how successful or impactful something is. So that's really hard for me as a 3, because I am so like, show me the numbers, show me the ranking. Are we in first? I want to win, right? I know that about myself, and I know it'll suck the joy out of me. It'll get me glued to my phone. And I'll miss out on the actual experience of going on book tour and hugging women and handing them the book and signing and hearing their stories and celebrating the good product that it is, because I'm focused on, where it might end up in a ranking. And so that's a personal commitment I made prior to even launching the book. And I think that'll hopefully make the experience much more freeing and enjoyable for me.
Girl, you are way ahead of your years. I'm like, how old are you? You've got to be like 60. I don't know.
68.
68. Isn't that when wisdom sets in? Well, it got to you at however old you are, 20, whatever.
That's awesome. I'm so encouraged to hear that.
Okay, so we're all going to go buy your book, Own Your Everyday, which is available everywhere. And we'll follow you on Instagram. How else can we keep up with you?
The podcast is She Podcast by Jordan Lee Dooley. It's on all the podcast platforms you could possibly imagine. And my website is jordanleedooley.com, and that links out to my shop and other resources that and coaching and all that stuff we'll have available later this year as well.
Awesome. Well, this was such a great conversation. So thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jessica.
There were so many nuggets in today's interview. Jordan talked about mentorship and why we need other people to speak into our lives. She talked about launching and asking other people to come alongside you. And we talked about what does it mean to network, not in this like icky way where people walk away feeling used, but what does it really mean to build relationship with other women and come alongside and support them? I would love for you to share this episode. I think it was just a really important one, and one that other women are going to get so much from. Give it a screenshot, put it on your Instagram story, hop on over to iTunes, tell us what you thought about this episode, leave a review for the podcast. I love Jordan, and I cannot wait for you to cheer her on and to get her latest book, which we talked about. It's called Own Your Everyday. It just launched a couple of weeks ago, and I would love love for you to go hop on over to Amazon and give it a buy. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Our music for today's podcast is by my friend Ellie Holcomb. The podcast was produced by Eddie Kolfoltz, and I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.